People say the Premier League is impossible to predict, but this podcast is here to help. We're working with Infogol to take a look at the numbers for each and every one of the Premier League fixtures this season. If you're looking to find value in the markets, data can be the key. Welcome to Premier League Insights. Hello and welcome to another episode of Premier League Insights, the show that's here to help you analyse the odds and find value in the betting markets. After another unpredictable week of Premier League action, I'm once again joined by Jake Osgathorpe from Infogol to help break down the numbers and look ahead to the upcoming fixtures for Gameweek 23. How are you, Jake?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I'm glad, that we missed the midweek round of fixtures because it's highly likely that I would have probably flagged up under 2.5 goals in Man United Southampton as a value bet, which would have been tanked after about, as soon as the red card, really. But yeah, coming off the back of a really good weekend, obviously there was a couple of, I think both of the Infogol best bets won last weekend at odds against, which is really, really nice. And sticking with Brighton to win as opposed to chickening out for the double chance or the draw no bet, that paid dividends as well. And got to mention the Cresswell assist that did come in as well. A nice big price. So let's hope we can do something similar this weekend.
Yeah, I think Pinnacle would have gone for the under 10.5 in the Manchester United Southampton game. But no, credit where credit is due to you. And you said it just there. Brighton win against Spurs, under 2.5 United Arsenal, and the Aaron Cresswell assist from absolutely nowhere. They all came in and not quite as good from a Pinnacle perspective, but the challenge rumbles on. This week, we're going to go with the obvious one, Liverpool versus Manchester City as the highlight game for Pinnacle. So what's the Infogol pick?
Yeah, we're going to stick with Brighton. Obviously, they're a bit of a buzz team at the moment, beat Liverpool in midweek as well, but they're playing against Burnley. If Brighton hadn't gone on this good recent run of form, this would probably be not so much a relegation 6-pointer, but definitely a big game down at the bottom. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be a really interesting game at 3:00, that one.
Well, what we'll do is we'll dive straight into our first game, Aston Villa versus Arsenal, and two teams looking to bounce back after defeat in midweek. I think we spoke about whether there was anything in the Arsenal revival on the last show that we had, and didn't really give themselves a chance to show whether they turned the corner because they were down to 10 men right on half time, 9 midway through the second half when Leno was sent off. They're still around sort of mid-table process-wise, slightly above average when you look at the defensive side of things, which is a big improvement for them. But the attacking process, it's kind of around middle of the pack. But the players that they've got, I know Aubameyang was out for a couple of weeks, but Lacazette, Saka, Willian just hasn't got going for them. Pepe was obviously a big buy, but hasn't really done much. But those sorts of players, you've got to be expecting more from them. Villa, meanwhile, they obviously struggled against West Ham. They did beat Southampton the game before that, which was after we last spoke. But they're pretty fortunate in that game. Both, like the XG figures, massively favoured Southampton. There was a handball in there. I think it was Matty Cash that I do not understand how that was not a handball. You had Danny Ings' late equaliser that was chalked off when it was like someone's backside just about playing him off or whatever it was. I don't know with them whether they're in a bit of a decline, whether they're just having a blip, but the market seems to think it's the former of those two, as Arsenal are actually the favourites here. 37% chance of the win at 2.66. Villa are 2.77, so a 35% chance for them, and the draw is 28% at 3.51. Arsenal's improved defence, struggling in attack, has probably had an impact on the goals market as well. Under 2.5 is the favourite. Probably looking to go against the market in both of these, maybe myself, Jake, but I'm interested to see what the Infogol model says.
Yeah, just out of interest, what's the Pinnacle got the goal line priced up at for under 2.5?
So we're at 2.5 and 3 split. So if I change it to 2.5, we're on 1.79 for the overs.
Right. So that straight away is a massive value play on our side, is opposing that number right there. We're at 55% chance of under 2.5 goals. So we make it around 1.79, 1.8 that under 2.5 goals should be the favourite. So there's huge value there. And I think the reason behind that is the, you mentioned it there, Arsenal's improved defence. We've seen Villa put in 2 really poor back-to-back attacking performances, 0.77 XG against Southampton, 0.66 against West Ham. And this is a team that over the course of the season have averaged around 2 expected goals per game. So those 2 performances were well below par by them. And I think Arsenal, they'll know that if they go toe-to-toe with this Villa team, give them space to exploit, I think that Villa could easily win this game quite comfortably. So I do expect a more reserved approach from Arsenal. The missing Louise, which I know the sending off was very similar to the one that Jan Bednarek suffered, and Bednarek is able to play this weekend, whereas Louise isn't, due to that being overturned. So they're missing him, they're missing Leno as well, which is huge. Matt Ryan, who the guy they brought in from Brighton on loan, he's also out for this game. So you're looking at a 3rd choice goalkeeper in net for Arsenal, which is kind of ironic, seeing as though they sold Emi Martinez to Villa in the summer, who was arguably better than Leno last season. So there's a lot of things that to consider in this game, but I do think that given the personnel issues, not sure if Tierney's going to be back available as well, I think that we could be in for a pretty reserved approach from Arsenal. And to be fair to the Gunners, there's been a stigma around them, particularly away from home over the last 4, 5, 6 years even, where they've been a really easy team to play against when they are on the road. This season it's been completely different. They've actually been really, really good away from home. The process is really solid, averaging around 1.4 expected goals for per game. They're allowing 1.14 expected goals against per game. So they're not giving away too many chances away from home. They're playing much more solid kind of football. And even against Wolves, going down to 10 men, they only conceded around 0.8 non-penalty expected goals in that game. So even when being reduced to 10 men and then 9 men, they didn't concede too many chances to Wolves. And that's why the game was still in the balance almost towards the end of the 90 minutes. So I'm just looking at the XG table now. And based on the away process, only 6 teams have got a better process away from home than Arsenal this season. United, Chelsea, West Ham, which you'll be pleased to hear, Leicester, Liverpool, and Manchester City. So they're making positive strides away from home. But as mentioned, Villa, in terms of their attacking numbers, I know they've had a couple of off days, but overall this season, especially at Villa Park, they've been simply just unbelievable, averaging around 2.28 expected goals for per game at home, which is a staggering number, conceding just 1.28 expected goals against per game. So they're not conceding too many good chances on a regular basis either. So I think that defences could be on top in this game. In terms of the 1x2, the market has it's got Arsenal favoured marginally. It's a very, very evenly split book, actually, looking at the figures. And we actually make Villa marginal favourites. We're giving them 38% chance of getting the victory. So there is a small amount of value in backing Villa to get the win in the 1x2. But I do think that under 2.5 goals is a serious play at a price that looks to be around 2.2, 2.25. But if you want a bit of extra security, I think taking under 3 goals on the Asian line, which obviously would mean a stake back if there is exactly 3 goals, I think that is a much safer play given the attacking firepower that Villa in particular have.
And just on the firepower for Villa, then, do you think they've got enough outside of Jack Grealish and Ollie Watkins? I know Watkins he had that barren spell. He scored a couple in his last few games, but I mean, Traore's kind of in and out of the team with El Ghazi. They've obviously got Ross Barkley, but in terms of going forward, do more people need to chip in? What do you make of sort of across the line for Villa in terms of their attacking output?
I think they've got an exceptionally well-balanced attack. I don't know if I said it on this podcast, but I think Bertrand Traore is just effectively just a slightly taller, left-footed version of Jack Grealish. They both do the same thing when they get on the ball. They're both very direct with their approach. They get the ball, they carry the ball past players, they can beat a man, which helps the team get up the pitch. So in terms of the non-penalty expected goals, which is non-shot expected goals, which is something that I've spoken about on here previously. Those 2 players in particular will be really, really important to Villa in terms of driving the ball through the channel, through the lines, and getting them up the pitch. El Ghazi is a slightly different player. He's not as direct as those 2, but he does find himself in scoring positions much more regularly than the pair of them. He's averaging 0.66 expected goals per average match this season, which is actually the highest in the Villa team. Ollie Watkins is at 0.57. So when El Ghazi does play, he does get himself in scoring positions. But I think overall contribution, Traore it balances that front 3 especially well. And I think Barkley is probably been one of most underrated signings of the summer window. I think he's been really, really good. Brought something different to that Villa team. He himself's averaging around 0.3 expected goals per average match. And they've just brought in a similar sort of midfielder to Barkley from Marseille, Morgan Sanson, who's put in some very similar numbers to Barkley from last season when he was at Chelsea. And we saw, I think he's averaging around 0.57 expected goal involvements per average match this season is Barkley. And I think that's just mainly because he's playing in such an attack-minded Villa team. And I think that the options that they have, like I said, I think they're a very well-balanced team. Ollie Watkins is the sort of gel that sticks it all together, bringing players into play, making the runs into the channels that leave spaces for the likes of Traore and Grealish to get on the ball. They're just a really exciting team to watch. I think the top of, or near the top of pretty much every attacking metric this season. Non-penalty big chances, expected goals for per game, non-penalty expected goals for per game, and even just the basic sort of shots on target, they're top of those stats as well. So this game's going to be a struggle for them. Like I said, Arsenal's defensive improvement is, it's not gone unnoticed, and I think it deserves a little bit of respect at this point. So I think, I'm hoping to see an entertaining game, an end-to-end match, but I don't think it's going to turn out like that. And I think Villa will probably create the better of the chances, but I think it'll end up being a low-scoring game. So, like I said, under 3 goals is probably my best bet in this on the Asian line.
Well, we'll get on to the next game, and it's the one you've picked out as the Infogol highlight game with Burnley versus Brighton, and 2-0 losses for Burnley since we last spoke, 2 1-0 wins for Brighton. Burnley's were against Chelsea and Man City, so they wouldn't really have expected much from them. But Brighton's wins against Tottenham and Liverpool, it's mad to think how quickly a team's season can turn around when they were sort of down the bottom, relegation contenders, and all of a sudden they kind of get some results that their performances have deserved. And I mean, anyone who's a believer in XG or follows it, it's good to see Graham Potter actually getting some decent results and relieving some pressure on him. They are favourites here to make it 3 wins from 3, despite being on the road. But Brighton are 2.23, Burnley 3.81, and the draw is 3.21. So that's 44% chance for Brighton, 26% chance for Burnley, and 30% on the draw. And as you'd expect from their recent results and the figures over the season as a whole, it's a low goals total at 2 for this one. It's going to be an interesting one with your highlight game, Jake. You obviously like Brighton, having sort of tipped them up last time we spoke. You often speak about the market underestimating Burnley. So which way are you going to be leaning on this one, or is it neither and you're looking for the goals market?
Yeah, I think it's ultimately neither, and I'm going to the goals market. But I think you can make a case in particular for Brighton in this game. We do say regularly on this podcast that Burnley are a very underrated team when it comes to betting the Premier League, and I think Brighton have probably been the opposite in recent weeks. That their price, for example, at home to Tottenham, they went off at about just short of, I think it was 9-4 in the end. But if for example, if that was Burnley playing at home to Tottenham, you're going off at probably 15-4, and Fulham are going off at probably even bigger than that. So the market is smart. It knows that Brighton are in a false position, and effectively it's pricing them up in that manner, like a mid-table team as opposed to a team in a relegation battle. So, I think this is interesting. I think that the Infogol models, I think it was still rating Burnley marginally too high. The performances this season have been quite shocking, really, compared to last season, but they have still managed to get points on the board. I think they're averaging around 0.86 expected goals for per game this season, which is second worst to only West Brom. And defensively, they're allowing around 1.4 expected goals against per game. So you compare that to last season, they're averaging around 1.4 expected goals for per game. So they're down about 0.6 of an expected goal in attack. The defence has stayed pretty much the same. So they are a worse team than what we saw last season, but they have managed to get points on the board, which is the main thing, really. And they've got a nice cushion between themselves and the bottom 3. The issue with Burnley coming into this is the fact that in the last 2 matches, while they have played Chelsea and Manchester City, they basically just rolled over and had their belly tickled effectively. I think they managed a total of 3 shots across those 2 games, equating to 0.21 expected goals. So just minimal threat from an attacking standpoint. And then you look even further back, and 0.79 expected goals against Villa, which is again a very low total. Very fortunate to score 3 times from that. And then against Liverpool, they managed just 0.3 non-penalty expected goals. Against West Ham, it was 0.44. So, you're getting the idea that this Burnley team are just not creating chances whatsoever. And they got Brighton, who coming into this on the back of 4 clean sheets in the Premier League, 3 1-0 wins in that time. And, all 4 of those games, they've deserved the win. They've won the XG battle in all 4. The way in which they dominated Tottenham was... although I tipped Brighton up, I didn't think they would be as comfortable in that game. They racked up nearly 1.8 expected goals, limited Spurs to around 0.4. So the level of dominance in that performance was really, really impressive. And then they went to Anfield and actually beat Liverpool on the XG battle, which is something that very, very rarely happens to Liverpool, especially at Anfield. I think the only team that's won the XG battle at Anfield, I think last season, or for this season and last season, was Manchester City when they actually lost the game 3-0. So that's not that absolutely fantastic feat for Graham Potter's side. And yeah, the interesting thing, like I said, 4 clean sheets, but in all 4 of those games, including against Leeds, who are a rampant attacking side, Liverpool, who are obviously one of the best attacking teams in the league, they've not allowed more than 1 expected goal in any of those matches. So they've really tightened things up at the back. In that period, and they've not lost anything in attack either, which is really, really impressive. I think over that 4-game stretch, they've averaged around 1.6 expected goals for per game. So they really are, like you said at the start, getting the results now that are matching their performances. They've been a top 8 team in our XG table pretty much all season long, despite sitting in and around the relegation zone. So it's a good time to be on Brighton. I think this price is just a little bit too short, though. I think if it was about 2.35, I would be interested, but at the moment, I think we're looking at around 2.25. So just a little bit out of the value price range. So yeah, looking to the goal line, and given Burnley's attacking struggles, they really are abysmal going forward this season, relying solely on set pieces, it appears. And then you consider Brighton's really strong defensive numbers, but also the fact that away from home, they're not actually as prolific as they are at the Amex. I think the Amex are averaging nearly 2 expected goals per game. Away from home, it's at 1.1. So they themselves aren't as attack-minded away from home. So yeah, looking at the goal line, it's set at 2. I think that's very fair. And I think the odds against price is actually for the under 2 goals. That really appeals to me. That's something that I think... I was going to tip up under 1.5 goals for a bit of a bigger price, but under 2 goals with the the possibility of it finishing maybe 1-1 or 2-0 if Brighton have a 1-0 lead and Burnley throw bodies forward. Brighton go on the counter-attack just as they did against Tottenham at the weekend, and Alderweireld pulled out a really, really late block to deny the 2-0 if that kind of thing happens and they do score this time. Being on the under 2 goal line is beneficial for that reason. So yeah, I think under 2 goals, it's priced at 2.05 on Pinnacle. That is a really good bet that I'm putting forward as Infogol's bet.
I think you've proven already, Jake. You know when to take a calculated risk and when to maybe sort of play it a little bit safer. But you mentioned there, first of all, when you stack up those really poor Burnley attacking figures, it might not be long before we're having that conversation again about them dropping down the table and potential relegation. But in terms of the market and where Pinnacle's going with the prediction, it's all for Brighton on this one. As you said, I mean, the market is sort of in line with perhaps where they should be. And we know things like expected goals are considered in the prices. But 2.26 on Brighton is Pinnacle's prediction for this one. We will get on to our next game because we've got Newcastle versus Southampton, and the market has reacted a little bit to the Southampton defeat, but not as much maybe as some people might expect. They're still the favourites. Newcastle are coming in off the back of a disappointing result themselves, not quite as bad as a 9-0, but they're 3.07 and the draw is 3.33. So in terms of percentages, I don't know if I mentioned, Southampton 2.52. But your percentages are 39% for Southampton, 32% for Newcastle, and 29% for the draw. The total is on the league average at 2.5. Bettors are actually currently leaning towards the under for that. So perhaps Southampton trying to react and have nothing similar or anywhere near what we saw in the last game. But we've just got 2 teams for this. I mean, they're both having pretty poor seasons, and we'd kind of expect it from Newcastle, given what we've seen from them over the last season or two. Southampton, and we chatted about this last time we spoke, they've been really disappointing. And for them, it's clear that the attacking process, like put the 9-0 to one side for a second, but the attacking process is really dire from what we've seen from them in the past. They're the fourth worst in the league, 1.08 expected goals for per game. They could potentially have a chance here though against Newcastle, because Newcastle are conversely in amongst the worst in terms of defensive process at 1.59 expected goals against. It is kind of around sixth worst in the league, but very close to the likes of Sheffield United, Fulham, and Palace, who are just below them. So, do Southampton bounce back here, Jake, or can Newcastle maybe take advantage of morale being at rock bottom?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing around Southampton is not just the fact, that they've lost 9-0 for the second time in 2 seasons, which is just bizarre. And, I sort of feel sorry for Ralph Hasenhüttl there, but it's also the injuries and the players missing for Southampton. I mean, I don't know if you saw the market move in midweek. Manchester United, there was so much money came for them just as the team news was announced, purely because of Southampton's bench, which was pretty much non-existent. It was just youth team players, and we saw a couple of those players thrown into the starting lineup. The young lad that ended up getting sent off after 2 minutes was one of those. And yeah, the amount of players that they're missing is a massive concern heading into this game, just purely because it's getting to the point of looking at it now as who do they pick to make up an 11 or make up an 18 or 19 or however many people you can include in your squad now. So it's a good opportunity this for Newcastle to really put a bit of daylight between themselves or more daylight, should I say, between themselves and the bottom three. They were very unfortunate to lose to Crystal Palace, believe it or not. It's the third game in a row that Newcastle have actually won the XG battle. That's something I never thought I would say, given what we've come to expect from Newcastle. But yeah, they really created a lot of chances in that match. 2.43 expected goals to Crystal Palace's 0.76. That comes off the back of a 1.88 expected goal performance at Everton and a 1.44 against Leeds. But really interestingly, I was looking at a little bit more detail at the actual shot numbers rather than just XG. Against Leeds, they had 21 shots. Against Everton, 13. And against Crystal Palace, they had 22 shots in total. I think
Bruce Ball.
Yeah, revolutionary Bruce Ball now. But yeah, prior to those 3 matches, I think they were averaging around 8 or 9 shots per game. It was one of the lowest totals in the league. All of a sudden, they're shooting on sight, pretty much, is what it seems like. There's the shot map is still very much plenty of tiny little dots from around the 18-yard area, from 20 yards, 25 yards, low probability chances. But it does seem as though they are shooting on sight, and I wonder if that's just their way of trying to be a bit more proactive, a bit more attack-minded. But I do think that could be a potential angle in a shot line. I was looking at some of the prices for Newcastle shots. If you can get on board with any of those, I think I think around 13 plus shots is what I had around even money. So if you can get anything a bigger price than even money on 13 plus Newcastle shots, I think that is definitely something to get on board with, especially given Southampton's, like I've said, injury issues, mainly defensively. And I think that given the hammering that they took in midweek, and the confidence is going to be rock bottom, the psyche is going to be all over the place, it could well be a case that Southampton turn up here and just aim to sort of defend and play in that low block that we have seen them playing quite a few times this season. You think back to the Liverpool game where they actually won 1-0. They took an early lead and then just sort of retreated and sat in a really difficult to break down block. And if they do that, then Newcastle could easily rack the shots up from outside the area, because they'll get frustrated. I mean, they've got players that can create and beat a man, the likes of St. Maximin, but they haven't really got too much quality in the attacking area to break down that deep block. So I would imagine that it'll get to a point where they just start firing shots from anywhere. And that's where you see your shot total increase. So that's one angle in this game that I quite like the look of. The other is just looking at the goal line. I think that the goal line is, under 2.5 is the favourite, but I think it should be a little bit shorter. It's around 1.88 for under 2.5. We make it around 1.8. And again, if you take the 9-0 game out of the equation for Southampton, a game in which they conceded nearly 5 expected goals, Southampton have allowed just 1.3 expected goals against per game this season, which is, I think it's a top half defensive process. So they're not, even what's going to happen now is that for the rest of the season, that 9-0, that 5 expected goals is just going to be massively inflate their totals. So that's something to bear in mind. And it was something to bear in mind last season when it happened as well. And probably next season when it happens again. So it's just trying to pick the right team that's going to beat them 9-0. But yeah, I've got the list up now of players that they're potentially missing. So Kyle Walker-Peters, who's a starting right back, he's questionable. Jan Vestergaard, who was one of their starting centre halves, questionable as well. Mohamed Salisu, the centre half he brought in the summer, he's questionable. Romeo's questionable. Diallo, the midfielder who replaced Romeo when he got injured, he's questionable. They're all doubts. Michael Obafemi, the striker. Will Smallbone, the lad who got sent off in midweek, obviously can't play. Nathan Teller, winger. Theo Walcott, they're all definitely ruled out. So I think I lost count on my hands there, but it's about 11 players or 10 players that I've named that are missing. But yeah, the only positive, as I mentioned in the Arsenal game, is that Jan Bednarek is actually available for this, having had his red card overturned. So that's one positive, but I do think that this is going to be a real uphill battle for Southampton. And as you've said, they've not been the best attacking team so far this season. They've actually really struggled in that department despite such a hot start to the season, especially away from home. They're averaging just 0.9 expected goals for per game. So under 2.5 makes a lot of appeal at 1.88. And depending on the price that you can get, or what's available, I'm just looking now. Newcastle plus 0 on the Asian handicap, 2.16. That does appeal to me. If there is going to be a winner of this game, I think it will be Newcastle, and there is a small amount of value based on the Infogol model in getting Newcastle on side in this game. But I would take the plus 0 on the Asian handicap. It's effectively a draw, no bet. So if it finishes in a draw, you get your stake back, which I think is the most likely outcome of this game. But if Newcastle win, then obviously you get a nice winner. The only way you lose is if Southampton actually win the game, which I think is the least likely outcome in this one. And it definitely isn't a value play looking at the current prices.
Well, there's your big tip for the 2021-22 season. Just bet on Southampton to lose 9-0 every week and see what happens.
There'll be a special priced up somewhere. So Southampton
and it'll be
9-0.
ridiculously short compared to what it should be as well.
Yeah, it should be 9-1 for a 9-0.
Right, Fulham versus West Ham is next on our list, and I think at the start of the season, myself and probably yourself included, we would have had these sort of close together in the table at one stage. It's currently Fulham in 18th, West Ham in 5th. Fulham.
Just say that again, Ben.
Yeah, exactly. West Ham in 5th place, Jake.
Crikey.
Still getting used to it. No, Fulham deserve to be where they are based on expected goals. West Ham, even as a West Ham fan, have perhaps been a little bit unfortunate, but I think what you have to say West Ham is they have played consistently well. They're pretty much bang on with their expected figures. They're 34 scored from 35.2 expected, 28 conceded from exactly 28 expected. And the reason they've kind of been a little bit fortunate, I think, is because it's more the teams below them have underperformed against their XG. The likes of Chelsea and stuff like that has kind of bumped West Ham up a little bit. I think I said on last week's show that Fulham have made improvements and they've just drawn a couple of games. But I looked back at it today. They're actually winless in 11 in the league. Of course, there is a few draws in there, but it does look like it's going to be a real struggle for them come the end of the season. The market does like West Ham. They've pushed them towards odds on 2.13 at the moment. It's 46% win probability. Fulham are 3.67, which gives them just under 27% chance. And the draw is slightly short at 3.55, which is just over 27% chance. Another one where the bettors like the under as well, quite a bit, 54% chance of under 2.5 here. An interesting one. Does the good form continue for West Ham, Jake? What do you make of this?
I think so, yeah. I think the market move in West Ham's favour is fully deserved. A little bit annoyed about it because we've lost our value now in West Ham. We've now got it priced as exactly the same as what you've said there, 46% chance of an away win. So that the market's got this one spot on really, and I think, to be honest, I think by kick off and closing line, I think that the West Ham will probably be around even money, maybe even odds on, and I think that would also be fully warranted. I think, yeah, Fulham, like you said, they're winless in what seems like forever. Even though they keep getting plaudits for the way in which they play, and that Scott Parker's turning things around, he's not. It's just to put it quite simply, he's not. The underlying,
I've fallen foul to that myself.
yeah, I said it on last week that there seems to be so much love for Fulham and what they're doing, and some of their performances, and you just highlighting one or two performances, playing Chelsea close and a decent first half against Liverpool. But the bottom line is that they're still creating next to nothing in attack. I think it's 1 expected goal per game they've averaged over this 11-game period, and they've conceded nearly 1.8 expected goals against per game in that period as well. So you can see just from those raw numbers that they haven't really deserved to win any of those matches. They've not. I think the only game they've won the XG battle in was actually against West Brom, and that was only marginal. So, yeah, it is for me anyway. It's panic stations for Fulham. I think that they're in real trouble of being sort of swept away with the likes of West Brom and Sheffield United. And the way it's looking at the moment, Sheffield United could well finish above Fulham and West Brom, because Fulham and West Brom, they're just really struggling on the attacking front while looking leaky in defence. And I think that this is going to be another game. To be fair, the caveat that people have thrown about this 11-game winless run is that I think they played 6 of the top 8 in this 11-game winless run. And that suggests that they've had a pretty tough schedule. Over half the games have been against pretty elite opposition. But then in this game, they're playing against a team that are 5th in the table, so it falls into that same category of a tough game. And yeah, even at home this season, they've been really easy to play against. I think they've scored 0.6 goals per game, which is suggests that they're not going to pose too much of a threat at all. Their expected goal total at home's at 1.05. And defensively, they're averaging 1.6 expected goals against per game. So they effectively are just really easy to play against. There's a lot more hustle and bustle. There's more effort, more energy about the Fulham team, which I think is what's catching people's eye. You think of the midfield in particular. You've got Anguissa in there, who's a big body boy, puts himself about. He's got a lot of quality on the ball, and you can see that him and whoever partners him in midfield, whether it be Reed or Lamina, they are putting in the shift. They are getting around the pitch. And then you've got the players in front of them, the likes of Lookman, Loftus-Cheek, who look really exciting whenever you get on the ball. But when they get on the ball so little in the match that it doesn't actually make too much of a difference. And defensively, he switched to a back 5 earlier on in the season, and there were signs that was working, but they just become really easy to play against. And Leicester just exploited them. I don't know if you've seen the goals from midweek, Ben, but both of them effectively came from...
the James Justin one was... They just walked through them, didn't they?
Well, I was just going to say, how high was the line? Like, they were on the halfway line. You've got players like Iheanacho, Maddison, who are quick and can play those decisive through balls, and you're playing on the halfway line. And I'll tell you, if they do that against West Ham with a rejuvenated Jesse Lingard and a Mikel Antonio, they're going to get crucified. And I think that for me is a massive worry, because Fulham will probably look at this game and think this is a good opportunity for us to get a win. Whereas against Leicester, they probably thought a draw would be a good result here. And I think that could be really worrying for them if they see this game as a lesser challenge than the Leicester game, because West Ham are performing at a level that is very similar to what Leicester have put up. Even though Leicester have got a few more points, these two have put up very similar underlying numbers. Leicester's expected goal difference is at 8.4, West Ham's at 7.2. So there is not a lot between them. And away from home, West Ham have really enjoyed themselves this season. I think only Leicester, Liverpool and Manchester City have got a better process away from home than West Ham. So they'll have no problems playing away from London Stadium whatsoever. Averaging over 1.7 expected goals for per game, allowing just 1.16 expected goals against per game. So they are putting up some really, really, really impressive numbers. And again, David Moyes deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. And the way in which they dealt with Aston Villa in midweek was, I wasn't expecting that. I thought that it potentially would be a good game for Villa to get back to winning ways, or get another win. Sorry, but West Ham really did play very well, racking at 1.9 expected goals. And to be honest, I think that West Ham will win this game. And at the current price, it's not a value bet, but we are pretty much in line and in agreement. I wouldn't put anyone off backing West Ham at odds against. I think that's could prove to be a big price by closing time. But in terms of value, I'm looking at goal line. Fulham's defensive issues, West Ham's really strong attack. quite a lot of West Ham games recently have seen plenty of goals, so I'm surprised to see the under as the favourite in this one. And yeah, the model makes over 2.5 odds on favourite, 51%, it's about 1.95. And you can back over 2.5 at 2.06. So there's a small bit of value there. And if you want to be a bit exotic, you can couple the two together, West Ham and over 2.5. And yeah, keep an eye out for Cresswell assist. If it stays around 8-1, that's a bet that's backable every week, because his delivery is sensational. He's on the set pieces, he's on the corners, and he gets the open play crosses in as well. And now playing in the back four as opposed to a centre half in the back three, he's getting forward a bit more. So if you can get, I think it was around 8-1 last week. If you can get around that price again, I would definitely be looking at it.
Yeah, maybe not, as you said, a value bet, because the model's pretty much in line with the market, but maybe the Infogol model hasn't incorporated just how good Jesse Lingard is.
Yeah, I think to be fair, we got a lot of help from Martinez in midweek. I don't know if you've seen the goals back, but I reckon I could have saved both of them. But yeah, you can just see just from the sort of, even in the short space of time, the energy that he brings to that forward line. I know Pablo Fornals has been a really, really good player for you this season, but he's not quite as dynamic as Lingard.
Yeah, jokes aside, I think what it is, it's more depth, isn't it? So Jesse Lingard, I mean, he's not going to play like that every week, but Fornals, you've got Jared Bowen as well on the other side, so there's now more sort
of Ben Rama as well is playing quite well at the moment. So, but yeah, really, really impressive. And I think the link up between Lingard and Antonio in particular in that game, something to keep an eye on moving forward.
Right, well, let's get on to Manchester United and Everton, and we're not going to do the Southampton 9-0 to death, but from a Manchester United perspective, obviously a good way to bounce back from a couple of poor results. They had the loss to Sheffield United. They drew 0-0 with Arsenal. They're still a way off Manchester City, but they're obviously going to be high on confidence going into this one. Everton haven't really been that great since we last spoke. They've had a real dip since the start of the season. Then they sort of went up again with a good sort of run of 5-6 games, but they were terrible against Newcastle, 0.77 XG with a 2-0 loss. Bit better against Leeds, obviously got the win and 2-1, but it was 1.8 XG in that one. They just seem very up and down. You never know which sort of Everton side is going to turn up. They're massively overperforming according to their process. They're sixth, but playing like a team that's kind of 14th, 15th in the table. And really for them, it's the attack that's letting them down, creating, I mean, it's not terrible, 1.35 expected goals for per game, but a team that's meant to be a top 6 contender, it's obviously quite a way off. And I think, for me anyway, it seems a lot of the time there's this sort of some big sort of close range chances from Dominic Calvert-Lewin, especially, that sort of jump out of my mind that could be boosting those figures even more. But Infogol doesn't actually have Manchester United as the second best team in the league according to your expected goals table, but they are getting close. They're managing to get results when others haven't. 62% chance of a win here, Jake. Do you think that's a fair mark in terms of where the market's at, or maybe one where the goals market could appeal? We've got over 2.5 and 3 taking the bulk of the action at the moment. What do you make of all the markets?
Yeah, I think the 1x2, we've got it priced up exactly the same, 62% chance of a home win. I think the goal line is where we're going to find our value, and I think the market is maybe slightly overreacting to the 9-0, which is pushing the goal line up, but they United were extremely ruthless, weren't they? Even against 9 men, there was no foot off the gas. It was literally, let's try and rack up as many as we can. And you've got to appreciate that. That's the sort of mentality you want. And ultimately, it's done them the world of good, not only for the confidence, and obviously quite a few strikers got goals, Martial in particular. But it's also boosted the goal difference, which could be huge come the end of the season. It's sort of rectified that 6-1 defeat that they suffered early on, that obviously that -5 goal difference was sort of eradicated pretty much, and almost doubled. They finished with a 10-0. But so they'll be in a really good headspace coming into this. And I think to fancy the chances, Manchester United, although the issue that they have is that at home this season they haven't been as good as they've been away from home. I think the results tell you that story, and so does the underlying process. They've got an expected goal difference of 7.1. But if you take away that Southampton game where they had a plus 4.5 expected goal difference, the expected goal difference of the previous 10 matches was plus 2.6. So, yeah, they haven't been good. That home win's going to boost their underlying numbers for the rest of the season, effectively. But yeah, the main issue they've had prior to that Southampton game was actually creating chances at home, as opposed to actually conceding. They were conceding chances at home, around 1.4 expected goals against per game. That's going to have stayed pretty consistent, given that Southampton really threatened. But yeah, they're a really tough team to sort of assess, Manchester United, because the raw numbers sometimes tell a different story to the eye test. For example, the narrative around the Arsenal game was that, I think it was Keane in the studio afterwards was saying, do they not want to win the title? They're playing not to win the title. Then you look at the XG numbers and it's like, well, Cavani's missed 2 chances of around 0.6 XG. So clearly they're doing something right. And the same with the Sheffield United game. The emphasis was on the result, but the actual performance, conceding 0.4 expected goals in that game, it's very rare that you'd actually concede 2 goals from that to lose the game. So I think that their expected position of 4th at the moment is about right. I think that they are the 4th best team. We've got Liverpool and Chelsea above them. But I think that they've closed the gap quite considerably to the likes of Manchester City and Liverpool, which is all that they could really ask for this season. Everton, they're a very similar team to United. I mean, they played such a bad game against Newcastle and then go to Leeds and win the XG battle and quite comfortably win in the end. I think that the price, watching the closing line of that game was really interesting, because they were around, I think it was 8-5 or something. They were favourites at one point. They went off at 15-8, so the money really did come against them. But it was a much better performance, and I think that's just purely because they set up in a much more attacking manner. Lucas Digne was back in there, which is he's a huge player for them from a creative standpoint. We saw that for the first goal, got the assist for Sigurdsson. But having Doucouré back in as well was huge. His energy, breaking the play up. And the only thing that would actually make that team a little bit better would obviously be James and Alan. They've missed Alan hugely, and he's supposedly, he could be available for this game, which would be quite interesting, given that he can dictate the play, put his foot in, win the ball back. But yeah, overall, that was a very rare, good attacking performance from Everton. I think that's their best attacking display based on expected goals since early December when they beat Burnley. I think that was about 7, 8, maybe 9 games ago. So they have really struggled on that front, and that could well prove to be a one-off, because we know how Leeds are quite easy to play against. Their defensive process is second worst only to West Brom. So they could struggle against this Manchester United team to actually create chances. I know I've said that United's process isn't great at home, but overall it's one of the better defensive processes in the league. So I'm again looking to the under goal line. He said it's set at 2.5 and 3. I think that's probably about right. We make value on under 2.5 goals though, 48% chance of under 2.5. But again, I think taking that under 3 goals, you get that extra bit of security. It's at 1.72, which is a pretty backable price in my opinion. Especially, like I said, if it finishes 2-1 or 3-0, you're getting your money back. Whereas under 2.5, if there's an early goal in this one, then I would expect either way teams to open up. So opposing goals is the way to go, and in my opinion, taking the under 3 on the Asian goal line is the best way to do it.
And I think Manchester United fans, and I think most people sort of looking at the table and the way it is now, would probably say they're well and truly in the title race. Do you think that's going to be the case in 5-10 games time, or right towards the end of the season?
I think that depends quite a lot on what happens this weekend. Excuse me. If Manchester City go and beat Liverpool in the backyard, then I think it's very difficult for anybody to catch them. But having said that, if Liverpool get a result and take points off City, and Manchester United, they've got 4 games coming up that all look fairly winnable. A couple of tough ones in there. Fairly winnable. I think they play obviously Everton. They've got West Brom away from home then after the FA Cup game. And then they've got Newcastle. So you've got 3 games there. If you can take maximum points, then you actually play against Chelsea and Manchester City back to back. And that could effectively define their season as to whether they are title contenders. But again, that could all be irrelevant because if Man City keep playing at the level they're playing at, no one's going to stop them effectively because no one can score against them.
Right, well, let's move on to our next game. We've got Tottenham versus West Brom. So it's the worst team in the league at the moment against West Brom.
I knew you were going to do that. Yeah, that's still funny.
No, things haven't got quite that bad for Spurs, but it's been a horrible run, hasn't it? I mean, not long ago, they're being touted as title contenders, but they've lost 3 on the spin, I think it is. I saw a stat that first back-to-back home games Mourinho's lost in his Premier League career, which I found was quite incredible. But it's only 3 wins since the start of December for them. And just like the same issues over and over again. It's over-reliance on Harry Kane, a general inability to create quality chances. I saw the kind of meme type image that the Infogol put out in terms of Son's overperformance from Infogol not that long ago. But the positive for Spurs is they're not as bad as West Brom. I don't think many in Premier League history have been as bad as West Brom. They had 2 massive games, Fulham and Sheffield United back to back. 1 point they got out of that. I think they were in the Sheffield United game according to XG, but obviously it was a 2-1 loss. They're bottom of the league on pretty much every metric. I've got it up here, 0.84 expected goals for per game, over 2 expected goals against per game. It just doesn't seem like there's much hope from them really of avoiding relegation. The market doesn't even give them much hope here, to be honest, either. 13% win probability with odds of 7.83, 4.59 on the draw is a 21% chance, and Tottenham gets 66% win probability at 1.471. So I guess it's tough to make a case for either of them on current form. Tottenham are clearly the better team, but what do you make of this betting market and how it compares to the Infogol numbers, Jake?
Yeah, it's very similar, despite the obviously massive issues that Spurs are currently facing. I still think this price is, even though West Brom are terrible, it could prove a little bit too short. I think that this is going to be a massive struggle for Tottenham, which is why, again, I'm looking towards the goal line for a bet. I just think that this Tottenham team, without Harry Kane, and he is still a doubt for this, Kane's contributed to around 54% of their total expected goals this season. So through XG and expected assists. So when, it's obvious that when you take him out of the team, he's, they're a much worse team from an attacking standpoint. But just to put the numbers behind that, he's basically contributed to over half of their expected goal total this season. So if you're taking him out of the team, the creativity, the getting on the end of chances reduces massively. And ultimately their attacking processes basically been crap since he left. I think he got subbed at half time against Liverpool, and they had around 0.06 expected goals in that second half of that game. They managed 0.44 against Brighton, 0.65 against Chelsea. Effectively numbers we would expect to see from West Brom. So it's going to be interesting to see how Mourinho combats that if Kane is out for a longer period, because they did look clueless against Chelsea for the most part. They looked like they were the team that were winning 1-0 for the most of that game. They were just sort of sat in there waiting for something to happen, and then all of a sudden they got a bit of urgency towards the end. But they're struggling on the attacking front. Fortunately for them, as you said, they're playing West Brom, a West Brom team who are the worst defensive team in the league. They're also the worst attacking team in the league. So Tottenham shouldn't have to worry too much about defending, really. They should worry more about trying to crack this West Brom defence in this game. So, I think Spurs' price, we've got it around 64% chance. So no value in backing them to win the game. Goal line is, the over 2.5 is the favourite, which I was fairly surprised at, especially, like I've said, given the attacking issues of both teams. I know West Brom are far from solid defensively, but they can hang in there with I think they've had a couple of narrow defeats against close, teams that have a mediocre standard, and then they've been blown out a few times by the better side. You think Manchester City, I think they beat them 5-0. But I can see this being a very, very tight game and a massive uphill battle for Tottenham just to try and score a goal, really. So again, the market's as I've said, over 2.5 is the short favourite. We're under 2.5. We're given a 51% chance. We're making that odds on. And I think that for me is going to be the best bet in this is taking the under 2.5 goals at 2.12. The other potential angle in is if you think, as I do, that it's going to be a really close game with few goals and a narrow Spurs win, you can try and get West Brom on side on the handicap, plus 1.5 maybe. I think that the plus 1.5, 1.65, which is a fairly short price, but I think that's got a really good chance of coming in. And if you can get the market, Tottenham to win by exactly 1 goal could be a really interesting angle in, given that, as I've said, they've had massive attacking issues, and it would not be a surprise, even against West Brom, if they go ahead and then sort of shut up shop and stop attacking.
Right, well, what have we got next? We've got Wolves versus Leicester as our next game, and it's one I think that previously would have been like a really important match in terms of sort of those top 6 places at the top of the league, and traditionally pretty close in the market as well. But for this one, we've got Leicester as pretty short favourites, despite them being on the road. They're nearly odds on 2.18 at the moment, so 45% chance of a win for them. Wolves are 3.62, which is a 27% chance, and obviously the remainder on the draw. We can get into the figures shortly in terms of where they're at in terms of attack and defence, but it's easy as well to see why bettors like the under here, and they've actually pushed the goal mark down to a split of 2 and 2.5. At the moment, Wolves are a fair way adrift in 14th. Recent win against Arsenal, obviously that was against 9 men, as we said earlier, but they've also lost to West Brom, Palace. I think they lost to Burnley as well recently, and that was kind of really where they had that lack of a spearhead in attack. They got William Jose, who's come in and potentially can change that. Leicester, on the other hand, absolutely flying, very similar to last season at this point, but we would have seen them drop away after Christmas, where they've maintained their good form and they're still third at the moment. Could have been a bit better had they not had that little blip against Everton and Leeds, but a really good season, solid at the back, solid in attack. Obviously, Jamie Vardy coming back in as well is going to be a big boost for them, but perhaps not as interesting as it once would have been, Jake, because of the injury issues that Wolves have had to deal with. But do you think it's maybe closer than what the market has it at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I think the price about Leicester, well, I think they should be favourites. I think it's a little bit too short. We're giving them a 38% chance of winning, so nowhere near the sort of prices that you quoted there. I think that's probably still because we're still ranking Wolves as a mid-table team to top half team, and I think at the moment, or in particular this season, they performed more like a bottom half team over a long period of time. But one thing that they continue to do is look fairly solid at the back. They, especially at home in particular, they're averaging 1.1 expected goals against per game at Molineux, so they are really difficult to create against. And I think that that's going to be the story of this game, really. Leicester, as I've said previously when I was mentioning West Ham, the only Manchester City and Liverpool have got a better process away from home than Leicester. They're averaging 1.8 expected goals for per game, 1.18 expected goals against per game. So effectively, you've got 2 really strong defensive teams that clash in here. And I think when fully fit, Wolves are probably on a par with Leicester. And I think that's why in recent seasons, or since Wolves gained promotion, these matches between the two sides have been very, very close in terms of result. There's been very few goals. I think the last 3 matches have all seen under 1.5 goals. 2 of those finished 0-0. I won't be surprised to see something similar in this game, even though Leicester are obviously playing at a much better standard than Wolves at the moment. Wolves' defensive ability in particular, I just think is going to be really difficult for Leicester to break down. And if you remember back to the game at the King Power earlier on in the season where Leicester won 1-0, I think they had 2 penalties in that game. And other than that, they created next to nothing. So I could see this being very much the same, a very attritional game. Fine margins that will decide it. Could easily finish 0-0. I think if you can get a decent price about a 0-0, maybe about 8-1, something like that, 9-1, I think I'd put half a point on that just out of interest, because I think it is going to be that low scoring. But yeah, even though the goal line is very low, we're still finding a bit of value in that low goal line, and a couple of ways you can get involved. take the under 1.5, which I think is a very fair bet. But again, just playing on the side of caution. Under 2 Asian goals is definitely is probably the smarter play. I think you're looking at around. I'll just make sure I get the right one. Yeah, you're looking at odds against actually for that 2.28 for under 2 goals, which I think is a really, really sensible play. I can see Leicester winning 2-0. I can see a 1-1 draw. I can see a 1-0 win either way or a goalless draw. But any more goals than that, I'd be very, very surprised.
Yeah, I think, well, Leicester obviously going to want to keep pace at the top of the table. And one of the teams, or the team that they're going to try and catch, feature in our next game, Liverpool versus Manchester City. I'm not saying Burnley and Brighton isn't a highlight game, but I think this one undoubtedly is the highlight fixture for the weekend. Obviously, the title race looks a lot different than it did sort of a few weeks back or a couple of months ago. It feels like it wasn't that long ago that City were kind of hovering around sort of the top half of the table. Now I think they're 3 points clear at the moment, aren't they? They've got a game in hand. You mentioned it earlier as well, and we talked about it quite a bit last week, just how good that defense has been. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And maybe Jesus can begin to step up a little bit more, or Sterling in a more central role. But obviously Aguero, I mean, barely played at all this season, but they're still managing to score goals as well. But no Kevin De Bruyne for this game, I think. Liverpool, I think if City can complain about De Bruyne not playing, I think Liverpool and the kind of injury concerns they have are in a different world. They obviously dipped into the transfer market because of the defenders, the lad from Preston and Schalke. I'm not sure if Alisson will be back for this game, but he missed the last one. Mane's missed the last few. I think all the injuries combined, they've had a little bit of bad luck in terms of being able to put the ball in the back of the net as well. But all those things sort of put together, you can see where that drop-off has come from. It's pretty close with City in terms of attacking process over the season as a whole. A little bit better, in fact, I think, and they're 2 expected goals 4 per game. But it's just not converting those chances of late is really what's caused them the problems. And when you don't do that, the drop-off is inevitable, isn't it? And I think that said, they win this, it's easy to forget, and they get 3 points here, and it's only 4 points. City's still got that game in hand, but I don't think it's over yet, despite what the outright odds suggest. I think Liverpool are pushing sort of double digits in the market to win the league. City are well sort of odds on for it. But individual game, and what we're talking about here, City are the favourites. 45% chance for win at 2.17. Liverpool priced at 3.44, which is a 28% chance, and the draw is 3.7, which is 26% chance. And bettors do like the look of goals in this one at over 2.5 and 3. That's the favourite at the moment. I mean, I'm kind of torn here, Jake. Manchester City, the form they're in, odds against, is going to appeal to people. But I cannot remember the last time Liverpool would have been at home and such high odds. So there's probably good sides to both of this, but which side would you be looking at from an Infogol perspective? And obviously your prediction can extend to alternative markets if needed. So where are you going?
Yeah, I'm sort of torn as well, and I'm a little bit surprised that that the Infogol model is actually not as short on Manchester City as I thought it would be. I thought that Liverpool or that Manchester City would probably represent value at that price. But according to the model, it doesn't. We've got City at around a 41% chance of winning. So nowhere near the sort of 45, 46% that the odds currently represent. So it's this game. I can't really get my head around how it's going to sort of play out, because you think of Manchester City's sort of stubborn defense and then you think of Liverpool's complete makeshift back four. And if Manchester City, well, listen, the only way I can see Liverpool getting a result here is by scoring a couple of goals, because I think Manchester City are going to score at least once against this Liverpool back line. You know, whoever plays there, whether it is Davies who gets a start, whether it's Kabak, the new guy, or whether Fabinho plays in there with Henderson, Manchester City, for me, will score at least once at Anfield. And then it is a question of, can Liverpool do something that very few teams have done this season, or especially since, I think it was Gameweek 8 or 9 where they lost to Tottenham, which is actually score past Manchester City. since that 2-0 defeat to Spurs, City have, I think, averaged around 0.45 expected goals against per game, which is just like incredible numbers, something that we've never seen before. That they are performing at a level that is sort of untouchable from an underlying numbers standpoint. It is basically, we're breaking new ground really with this defensive process currently. And if they continue in the same vein, then they will go down as probably the best defensive team that we've seen since we started collecting data, which was 14-15 season. They're currently around 0.78 expected goals against per game over the course of the season. I think the best is around 0.75. So they've got a little bit to go yet to actually be crowned as the best. But yeah, the other thing you factor in, they're not even conceding that many chances. Never mind XG. You think about Burnley, they created 2 chances against them. I think they went pretty much against Sheffield United in the home game. It was a 0.18 expected goals. I know we're talking about lesser attacking teams, but then you look at Aston Villa, who have posted incredible attacking metrics, and they could only manage 0.7 expected goals. So, yeah, for me anyway, the key in this game is, can Liverpool score against Manchester City? And if they can't, then they're going to lose, in my opinion. I don't think this is going to end 0-0. I think you think back to the game earlier in the season, the meeting where it was 1-1 at half time, and it was one of the best 1-1 games or 45 minutes you'll ever see in your life. The quality of the football, the tactics that were in play in that first half were sensational. And then they came out of the second half. It was almost like the managers had shaken hands in the dressing room and said, right, we'll call it a draw. Because neither team wanted to lose, which sort of made sense at that early stage of the season. Liverpool had a bit of a struggle. Manchester City obviously were struggling as well, but I think Pep Guardiola is going to go to Anfield and he's going to smell blood. He's going to know that this Liverpool team, they are absolutely beatable. It's something that the City haven't managed to do against Liverpool in a game that's actually meant something. I think that they obviously beat Liverpool 4-0 at the back end of last season, but that was after they'd already been crowned champions. So there's that sort of head-to-head record. Guardiola really doesn't have a good head-to-head record against Klopp. And Liverpool in particular this season they lead the sort of the top 6 mini league. They're unbeaten in 6 games against the big 6. Against the top 6. Well, I think they've won 4 and drawn 2 of those. Whereas Manchester City, I don't think they've actually beaten any of the teams in the top 6 at the moment. So slightly interesting. Big 6. I'll say big 6. I would get confused. Like, do we still include Arsenal and Tottenham in this big 6? Because
not for long. Not for long.
West Ham going to be in there next season. But yeah, ultimately Manchester City, I think it all comes down to whether Liverpool can score. If Mane's fit, they've got a much better chance, obviously, of breaching Manchester City. If I was Klopp, I would personally throw in both. You can't really throw in both Davies and Kabak, but I just think that when they play Fabinho and Henderson in midfield, they just miss so much in defence. They miss so much in midfield without having them there. So whether he does throw them in there straight away, just so he can get Fabinho or Henderson, or just one of them, just to sort of bolster that midfield, I think that would again give them a better chance. But based on the model, which is what I've got to go by, there is value in opposing Manchester City. And the best way to do that is taking the Asian handicap plus 0.5 with Liverpool. I think the price currently, I think it's about 1.75. I'll double check that now. Yeah, 1.78 you're getting for plus 0.5 for Liverpool plus 0.5. And I think, the model is suggesting that, but I would be I'd be very, very wary of that bet in particular, and I would certainly wait until team news is announced, because if Liverpool are playing with a back 2 of Henderson and Fabinho, I'd be very concerned. Not only because of the obvious weakness that poses for Manchester City to exploit, but because of how much it weakens Liverpool's midfield against Manchester City's midfield, which usually Liverpool have the upper hand in that regard, because the midfield 3 of last season, which was Wijnaldum, Fabinho and Henderson, they were, they're just so difficult to play against. There's a bit of everything there. But if you take 2 of those out, you throw Thiago in there, and whether it be Curtis Jones or someone or another player in there, it's a little bit easier to play against. And I think that Manchester City could have a field day. So I would wait for the team news on that. But yeah, based on the model, Liverpool plus 0.5 is the value. And if, to be fair, I think if Liverpool are to get something from the game, I think it's going to be low scoring. So if you like if you like getting Liverpool on side, then I'd potentially look at taking under 2.5 goals instead, which is odds against, to get a better price there.
Yeah, and I think Pinnacle's one. I mean, it's driven by that lack of depth in Liverpool, or just the sort of sheer number of players that they're going to miss, and the impact that you rightly mentioned there that it has on midfield and their ability to attack, but also just how good Manchester City are and how they'll be able to break them down. So it's a Pinnacle's market-led prediction is just a Man City win at 2.16 for this one. And I'd love to be able to ask you a couple of things about. I know we spoke last season about Manchester City's defensive issues in terms of the shots they gave up were of such high quality, and just how on earth they've managed to completely turn that on their head. But also with Liverpool and this whole Thiago thing, and whether he's actually sort of is detrimental to Liverpool's performance. I mean, there's so many sort of things to look at, but I've got my eye on the time. I know we've got a couple of games to get through, so I'll move us on to Sheffield United versus Chelsea. And I think you mentioned it earlier about Sheffield United potentially getting above West Brom and maybe even Fulham. They've won 3 of their last 5. A team that didn't win 1 in 17 or 18 games, whatever it was at the start of the season. In there as well, you mentioned about the game against Manchester City. They barely created anything, but any team that loses 1-0 against Manchester City, I think, is going to be relatively happy. And it kind of almost kept that confidence going and the good run going for Sheffield United. It's going to be difficult for them here, though. Thomas Tuchel is obviously coming to Chelsea. He inherited a good squad, and I talked about this on the previous show. They were, for the most part, playing well. They just weren't getting good results for a lot of it, and they've kind of gone through a bit of a tough patch since he's come in. He's won 2, he's drawn 1. They haven't actually conceded. I think you have to say that they've dominated all of the games that they've played in, albeit the quality of opponents like Tottenham, the best of the 3 that they've played, and we said what we said about them. I think the interesting one here for me is as well, you look at the team selection. I mean, Marcos Alonso's come in, Azpilicueta's come in, Hudson-Odoi's featuring a lot, so he's actually changing things up a little bit as well. Now, the market's pretty high on Chelsea to continue their good run. They're actually 1.49 at the moment, which is a 66% win probability. Sheffield United, as you'd expect, relatively low at 13% chance and odds of 7.64. And the draw is rated at 21% chance with odds of 4.59. So Chelsea do look solid. New look maybe with a couple of old faces coming into the team, but is Infogol in line with how much they should dominate this game? What do you think?
No, we think that price is too short. We make them around a 56% chance to win the game. And I think that's probably because we've got the goal line quite low, which is obviously therefore making the draw a shorter price than what the market is. Chelsea, they've been really impressive. There's no two ways about it. I think that more defensively they've been impressive than in attack. But yeah, they've held Spurs at arm's length for pretty much 90 minutes, 0.65 expected goals. Burnley, like I said, they only had 1 shot in that game, 0.14 expected goals. Then against Wolves, it was 0.63 expected goals. And that was after he'd only had about 8 hours to work with the team. So, yeah, there's promising signs there from a defensive standpoint. Still questions for me anyway in terms of their attacking numbers. 0.8 against Wolves, as I said, they didn't have much time to work with them. That can be accepted. But then only 1.35 against Burnley, which was quite a low total. I think they had quite a few shots in that game of low probability. And then against Spurs, the 1.9 expected goals, but 0.8 of that actually came from the penalty. So again, another performance in which they created few chances from open play. That to me certainly opens the door for another unders bet in this game. I think you said it there that when Sheffield United played Manchester City, they played them tough. There weren't too much in the game. They didn't create much themselves, but neither did Manchester City. And I can see this being following the exact same pattern. Chelsea will dominate the football. Sheffield United will not really threaten Chelsea, and Chelsea could well nick it 1-0. I don't see this being a really high scoring game at all. So I was very surprised to see under 2.5 available at 1.97 on Pinnacle. I think that's a very, very good bet. The model makes it around 1.9. So for me, that's probably one of the bets of the week. It's something that I think is a really, really strong play, given what we've seen from Chelsea under Tuchel and given what we've come to expect from Sheffield United under Wilder.
And then finally, we've got our last game of Game Week 23, Leeds versus Crystal Palace, and two teams that are probably just as unpredictable as each other. And even since we last spoke, I think that sums it up. But Leeds, it was 3-1 against Leicester, wasn't it? Followed by the loss to Everton. Palace, I think, won their 2 games since we last spoke as well. Both of them really up and down. Both of them, it seems difficult for the market to be able to price up. Where we've got them here is, let me just pull it up, sorry. We've got Leeds as the odds-on favourite, 1.869. The draw is 3.92, and the Palace win is 4.26. So in terms of your percentages, you're looking at sort of 52% for Leeds, 26% on the draw, and around sort of 23% on Crystal Palace. I think it's a tough one to end on, Jake, in terms of a prediction for this. You never really know with Leeds, do you? But clearly the market heavily fancies them here, and my guess is that maybe you aren't quite aligned with that, and maybe they're a little bit sort of overestimated. What do you think?
Yeah, your guess would be wrong. We've actually got Leeds exactly the same as the market, which is also surprising to me. And I think it just sort of emphasises how poorly we rate Crystal Palace more than anything. And this price that we've got at the moment that's available on the market, that tells you that even at Selhurst Park, Leeds would be favourite in this matchup. And I think that's probably a fair reflection of where the two teams are at. I was a bit disappointed by Leeds in midweek. I thought Everton would be a really decent team for them to play against, a team struggling in attack, but just sort of soaking up pressure for the most part. But they got caught out as has been the norm this season by a couple of defensive errors, high lines that were exploited, and that to me is a little bit of an issue coming into this game against Crystal Palace, who obviously have some real playmakers and some pacey players that can get in behind. I know Wilfried Zaha's out for this, which is a huge blow, but I did a little piece on their new signing, Jean-Philippe Mateta from Mainz, and his underlying numbers are actually exceptional this season, which was hugely surprising for me because Palace don't usually do fantastic deals, but it seems as though they've turned a corner with Eze and Mateta. He's only, I think there's only 4 players in the Bundesliga who have actually averaged more expected goals per average match than him this season. Lewandowski's obviously one, Erling Haaland's another, and then I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head, but he's in elite company in that league. And if he can translate that form over into this league, then he'll prove to be a really, really important signing, especially with Zaha out. But yeah, it was another typical Palace performance against Newcastle. Just sort of fluke into a win. Some good goalkeeping, some poor finishing, some good blocking. Ultimately conceding, like I said, 2.4 expected goals in that game, but coming away with the win. They've had massive issues away from home all season, though, Crystal Palace, allowing 1.7 expected goals against per game, which, given Leeds also concede chances, it does lend itself to a potentially high-scoring game. The market is obviously massively favouring the overs. You're looking at around a 1.6 for over 2.5 goals. The model is surprisingly on the fence. We're 50-50 over-unders, which is a bit of a surprise, but I think that to me says that we're not expecting Crystal Palace to contribute too much to this scoring. So yeah, huge value in opposing the goals. Again, I'm looking at the goal lines, the prices. It could well pay to actually get that bit of security again with the under 3 goals as opposed to taking under 2.5. Under 2.5 is at price at 2.3. Under 3 is at 1.8. So, it's a shorter price, but there's been a fair few 2-1s recently. And if this again finishes 2-1 either way, you've got that little comfort blanket that you're going to get your stake back. I'd be surprised if we see over 3.5 in this game. So under 3 at 1.8 is probably, for me anyway, it's a value bet, and it's for me the best way into this, the best angle in this game.
Right, and that does wrap it up for Game Week 23. And as always, Jake, some great analysis. Now, you set the bar high with the last show and those incredible selections that came out of it. So no pressure,
No
but
pressure.
exactly. Hopefully, it can carry on in that vein. And anyone listening, if you do want to take the Infogol numbers or look at the data in a little bit more detail, then you can follow Infogol on Twitter using the handle @InfogolApp. And you can also download the app on iOS and Android. All of the odds for Game Week 23 are available on pinnacle.com. Best of luck with any bets, and remember to always gamble responsibly.